Chapter 1. Maybe I should have given him more credit. Then again, sometimes all it takes is one wrong move to lose everything. So many years ago now, I didn't know how to tell my father what I was. I was young, and things were different then. I was convinced he would kick me out into the streets, so better to beat him to it. My black duffel and albatross around my neck, a symbol of permanence. At least this way I had control over my own exile, my own body, especially after having such little control over anything for so long. I had no idea if I could actually make it on my own, but I couldn't envision a way to stay. I knew he would be proud. My shoulders sagged from the thread of silence spooling longer and longer with each step I put between us. I just couldn't think of any other way to survive. I grew up in Vermont, a far cry from where I am now, but even years after my self-imposed exile, I can still feel the cold winds schedule their passing through my chafed and raised skin. Who would have thought I'd ever miss them? I've been in the South for so long now, it feels a part of me. Although I'll never get used to the people the South attracts. The lack of distinct seasons aside from a tropical storm or an unexpected cold front. I'm sure I never will. I left so quickly and never looked back. I have no idea what Father thinks of me now, or what he ever did. He wasn't the kind of father who talked about things. I don't know if he lived a long life or died young of a heart attack or loneliness. I made it so that he would never be able to find me. If a child leaves behind their marker long enough, it's hard to know how to find their way back. Despite everything, I hope he lived a life filled with purpose and joy. As I think on him now, the love and rage and joy I feel for him swirls together in my chest like a taut balloon. I guess it's true what they say. Some relationships can never become whole. There's not always someone to blame. I learned that the long, hard way. But I can't imagine having gone about my life any differently. As Ba himself used to say, that's just the way life is. I know what he means now. Ba never understood what it meant to live in my body. It has always been hard, but who could have known the world would become less tenable with each passing day? Each piece of the body born into my possession gradually taken, the right to do with it what I chose gone without warning, like a thief in the black cape of night. What is life, after all, without a body to call your own? The body snatchers aren't like Ba or anyone I've ever been close to. The ones calling the shots are the paperwhites, like Ma and her family, who neither me nor Ba were ever able to make sense of. At least then, they would have been familiar, like the hard ground I slept on as a teen, the blanket of leaves I crawled underneath when the shelters wouldn't take in a girl like me. I don't even know if girl is what I'd call myself, but no other word really does any better. So what's one insufficient choice over another? Sometimes language crowds the mind so much. It's like standing without gravity. Sometimes the ground tells you who you are. Which leads me here, to tell the story of everything that's happened since I first left. What's transpired and what I've learned pushed me out of myself and only left me with more questions. I'm left wondering whether running away was ever the answer. I always thought I'd become a sculptor like Camille Claudel or Martin Puryear, building forms with my body, the dark earth still imprinted under my clipped fingernails. But then all these bodies, including mine, were losing all their choices, and I could see what kind of future I could give to people like me, or people whose bodies just happen to go against nature, at least according to the people in charge. The laws these days make me question what the point of art is anymore. Sometimes there's no reason why nature goes sideways. Why would the universe give us science if not to use it? After a year on the streets, I went back to school, and over that first summer after graduation, I worked a 3-month internship as an embryologist assistant at FFI, Frank Fertility Institute, one of the top fertility clinics and reproductive science labs in the country. Wild that it would exist in the South of all places. Those 3 months were glorious and full of promise, electrified with what my future life could become. At the beginning, my days and nights burst with the little dishes teeming with the promises of little lives. If Ba knew that I left art behind to pursue one of the sciences, how proud he would be. He would be relieved to know I left sculpting behind. So impractical, he always said when I came home from another session at the studio, my dirty fingernails giving me away. But to be honest, working with the embryos and forming bodies out of clay didn't feel all that different to me. In those first few weeks, I wondered if I'd end up back here in front of the glass where I wash and sculpt instead of behind it, where I helped usher future beings into existence. Would there come a day that the prospect of my own future children would fall into the hands of some impersonal technician washing and reshaping my embryos just like I did? Whose hands would hold the course of my own future? Whose uterus would be lined with a question mark? Would it be mine? Or would it be someone else's? Would there be an I or a we waiting desperately for an explanation point? I would, in my own way, end up on the other side of that glass, but not at all like I expected. It is not yet time for that part of the story. On the day everything began, I trudged through the heat after I had wrestled my gooey legs away from the wood that was damp from the stifling humidity in the air. It reminded me of the time Ba and I waited for Uncle and Auntie Kwan to meet us at the mouth-watering dumpling restaurant, their dumpling house at the edge of Chinatown, before opening hours. We drove 45 minutes, well, 47 from start to stop, from our two-white suburb across town. The sun darkened Ba's arms, which were already a deep beige. As it painted the windows a blinking shade of yellow and spotted my cheek with freckles, I knew made him flinch. Yet another reminder of Ma. Ma's white blood was foreign to me too, even while it lived inside me. I knew ever since she called me Oriental and refused to take it back, that she would never see my body as hers. Whiteness can be a stronger impulse than the bond between mother and child, and yet she never had that either. With a flick of his wrist, my Ba popped our seats back to recline as far as they would, and without a word exchanged between us, I knew he intended for us to nap right there in the car in the middle of a strip mall parking lot, like it was something any father and child would do. And so we did. At some point, I wound up round and compact, like the little balls of dough I used to shove in my mouth when he would make us dumplings from scratch, my body tucked between his armpit and ribcage. He didn't mind. He never minded. We stayed like that, the heat suctioning us together, Ba snoring, my little mouth a drooling black circle, until we heard the engine next to us idle before coming to a stop, someone pointing at us through the window as she giggled at our slumbering bodies baking in the midday sun. As I got older, I became increasingly aware of what I was. I tried to imagine what Ba would do to me if I told him. Even in the ether of fantasy, my voice caught in the air like The Little Mermaid, my favorite movie as a girl. It seems so obvious now, but it took years to see the deeper meaning behind its power over me. How many times I rewatched that old DVD he bought at the used bookstore in town. So many I eventually wore it out to the point of disuse. Oh, how I wanted to be that precocious red-headed fish who saves her prince, my imaginary beloved's perfect shock of black hair imitating the waves. In this version of my dream, Ba is pale-faced, with a blonde leonine mane and a voice as terrifying as in actuality. The prince, in turn, saves me from the life beneath that one I longed for so much. A knife prick in my exposed chest. When her father destroyed her menagerie of man-made trinkets stolen from the Ark stranded in the deep, when the boom of his voice rattled the castle, when he, with his big, thick hands, shook the she-fish's shoulders, tiny and frail, for wanting what he was sure would destroy her, when he finally let her go, when his golden staff transformed her fins into tulle and toes, and he smiled like he always knew exactly how to love her, no matter how many times I watched those scenes, they always brought me to tears. If only it were that simple. There's no witch in this story, not really, only a memory of his hand, the lines casting his face in disdain whenever I made a mistake, no matter how large or small the transgression. Like clay, the skin remembers when the imprint shifts into a new shape, even when the sting recedes back into memory from air and time passing. His hand scared me the most. I'm sure after all these years my secret is obvious. The one that made me take leave of him. The one that put more and more distance between us. The one that made me choose the streets over pork belly bun and beef noodle soup. And a bed to sleep in. Bob must have known why I didn't cry all those times when he cut my hair like a boy. He only did it because he grew tired of the little hairs jabbing him between his toes as he walked barefoot in the bathroom. The clumps of hair that clogged the drain in the shower. Little did he know, he was only making the inside me match the outside. Honestly, it was a relief to see the mirror reflect the only image I could tolerate looking back at me. But that didn't mean he wanted to hear me say what I really was out loud. My razor-lined face and his hand-me-down trousers that fit me like a glove would mean something. That didn't mean Bob was okay losing face in front of all of his friends and coworkers, even if we barely saw them anyway. Even if it was my face that would lose out, not his. I couldn't bear to tell him this part of the story. To see his heart. The one that might still hope for a daughter. A want he could never confront. Fall to his feet. Like an act of deep respect shown by kneeling and bowing so low you touch your head to the ground. Beside, only a paternal grandfather deserved such deference. I couldn't bear to see how ugly I'd become, even to myself, through Bob's two dark eyes that looked back at my mongrel hazels. That's how he looked at me, as though I was alien, a creature that wasn't part of him, either. If I wasn't Ma's, and I wasn't Ba's, then whose was I? A question whose answer filled me with a fear and despair, one I often avoided thinking about. At least on the streets, I thought, I'd be free, and I wouldn't be alone. I'd have Co. At least that's what I thought at the time. I couldn't hold all of the memories. Too many. Like a cacophony of sirens wailing against my ears until I was unable to discern one from the other. Just thinking about it now leaves a bad taste in my mouth. It wilts, turns sour on the tongue. The first time that I can remember anyway, I was still in diapers, cloth ones Bob made for me out of secondhand blue and red gingham fabric. I was too young to tell the difference between cloth or Pampers. This is one of the last moments I remember when Ma hadn't fully left yet to chase a dream we weren't a part of. Before she left, Ma told me that when I was an infant, Bob would constantly wash the same 2 diapers over and over again by hand at the kitchen sink. He wouldn't let Ma do it because he insisted she never cleaned them enough. She begged him to use store-bought diapers, but he refused to spend money on something so wasteful. Too expensive! They would often fight about this. It would anger her so much that she would walk out, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days on end. On this one day, I don't know where Ma was. Out, who knows where. Perhaps crashed at a friend's house after playing bridge all hours of the night, or getting high with a man she met at a club. While Bal washed the diapers in the kitchen, he would have me sit down in the bathtub, naked and dry, to wait until the diaper was clean. I missed the fabric cradling my cold bottom as it stuck to the bottom of the porcelain tub. It made me nervous to not be where Ba was, even when Ma was still around. Ba was my anchor, my ground, my mirror. This one day, I must have felt impatient. I wanted company, or, at the very least, something to stimulate my senses. The sterile, empty bathtub offered neither. Before he could get to me, I'd already climbed over the rim of the tub with my squat, chubby legs and hoisted my little body onto the sofa, pushing 6 inches of the navy plastic slipcover to the side. I ran to the sofa too fast. Just as Ba was about to grab me from behind, the diaper slung over his bicep, thickened from working long, hard afternoons in our modest but elegant garden, a white paste of congee from our breakfast that morning shot out of my mouth and landed on the few inches of exposed sofa. I didn't have time to guess what would happen next. Boss shrieked in a pitch that my young ears could barely process. I'll never forget it. Maybe his scream was a word chastising me, or perhaps cursing my unknowing disobedience. I doubt I was old enough to understand the sounds as words then. He threw me back into the bathtub so that he could quickly clean the sofa without distraction. But Ba had tied the diaper so snug around my waist, it left red welts against my skin. This time, he had made sure the door was closed so tight I wouldn't be able to open it. He didn't come for me until long after my cries, beating out of my chest like some feral creatures, had gradually subsided into slow, slumbering breaths. That's how I slowly came to be of the world, with the understanding that my captor and my protector existed within the same body.